Hey guys, so I want to jump up here really quickly and make another video. This particular video is going to discuss the Herero genocide, and the genocide is something that took place in Namibia, South Africa back in the early 1900s at the very beginning of the turn of the century. The Germans came in and sought to enslave and kill and even destroy this particular Bantu tribe that resided in Namibia, South Africa. And it reminded me of the scripture, Psalms 83, that said, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember it word for word, but it was saying, let us come together and seek to destroy Israel, that the name of Israel will be remembered no more. So that definitely made me think about that. And then I saw, in researching them, I saw a lot of different similarities between their enslavement and then our enslavement in the Americas several hundred years prior, and even very briefly up and before that theirs began, ours ended. So I thought about immediately the scriptures, and it said that the curses will come upon us and pursue us. Now, I had never heard of this tribe before, and just to give you a backstory, the reason why this is so important to me is because those of you that watched my DNA results video, I ran my test in GEDmatch, and I was able to find a lot more breakdown into what was actually in my raw DNA. Over half of me, 81%, I believe to be exact, was West African, no surprise. But then there were some other parts of me that matched with Central Africa, that was just about 3%, and then South Africa was just under 4.5%. And so those are very small percentages, but for me they were very large because I did not expect to have any of those at all, according to 23andMe. So I began to pull the raw DNA, and I began to match it and see what else I could find from it. And lo and behold, I was able to find a list of other Bantu tribes. Some I had heard of before, like the Limba, and then the Himba, but others I hadn't heard of before, which was like the Herero and the Luhaya, the Fang or Fang tribes. So when I was Googling them, trying to figure out what they were and where they resided and what they looked like to see how much of a match I really was, I came across this information about the genocide. And so I wanted to do a video about this for a very long time, but I was hesitant because I didn't know how to go about it. There's a lot of information that would need to be presented, and I would have to do a lot of research and try to condense it and put it together into a video form. But thankfully I was able to find a video documentary. But that tribe was found in my DNA, and ironically I do look like them with the lighter skin and the smaller shaped eyes, or the slant eyes, or whatever you want to call it. And they were enslaved by the Germans. The Germans came in and sought to kill them, wanted to destroy them, and they enslaved them, put yokes of iron around their necks, and that goes back to the scriptures in Deuteronomy that he will put a yoke of iron upon your neck until he has destroyed you. They were hung from trees like we were. Their bodies were left as food for the fowls of the air. That's also in the book of Deuteronomy. And so when I read and I saw that, I had no idea that that was going on to anybody outside of the Negro that was taken from West Africa, the West African area, and shipped all over the world. But to see that happening, or has happened with people in Africa, outside of the Americas, with not quote unquote African Americans, it made me think, wow, the Bantus, that Hebrew gene, those curses are very true. The Most High said that they will come after you and will pursue thee and will be upon your generations for a sign. So for me, seeing what happened to the Herero tribe was a dead ringer to me in my mind, that these people are Hebrews. Have I done a whole lot of research on that? Have I found a lot of research about the Herero tribe being called Hebrews or recognized as Hebrews? No, I haven't, but I find it very ironic that the exact same things that happened to us in America happened to them. They died of thirst. They were driven out into the desert. They left their land. The scripture said that we will serve our enemies in want and nakedness and thirst and hunger and want of all things. It's ironic. So I want to share that with you guys to give you guys another informational video. I'm not going to talk any longer, and I'm going to start the video right now. I will also leave the link down below. Thank you again for watching, and I hope that this is a blessing to you. If it is, please share it with someone else, and like, comment, and subscribe. Bye-bye.
Six months after the start of the rebellion, Von Trotta landed in southwest Africa. He immediately met with Governor Leutwein and formally took over command. But at their meeting, Leutwein again appealed for negotiations to be resumed with the Herero. And this would have been the normal strategy in a colonial war. But the hysteria in Berlin meant that this no longer was a colonial war.
Von Trotter is not there to negotiate. For Von Trotter, negotiation is a sign of weakness. For Von Trotter, negotiation would be a shame to German honor, to German militarism. There is only one solution, the destruction of the Herero. Unfortunately for the Herero, they did not see that the rules of the game, as it were, had changed.
Yet the rebellion that Von Trotter had come to crush was essentially over. After the initial outburst of violence, the Herero had changed their tactics. After twice fighting the German garrison to a stalemate, the Herero had started to avoid all contact with the Germans. The entire people had instead moved as far away from the German settlements as they could get. They gathered at the last big waterhole before the Kalahari Desert, the great plateau of Waterberg, Water Mountain. There they waited, hoping for negotiations, but they never came.
I think the Hereros would have considered the war over by spring 1904, because the way wars were usually fought in Namibia was there was battles and then that was it. It was over, you settle it and you negotiate terms, and that's the end of that. The Hereros had proved their point. Don't take all our land, treat us as humans, and we'll let that be that. Because they were at the point where they could have attacked Windhoek and the main stations, but decided not to. They backed off they proved their point. So I think that from the Herero point of view, they were very clear on what had happened. Now the German side of the issue is completely different.
What the Herero at the Waterberg could not possibly have known was that instead of planning negotiations, the Germans were assembling a colonial army unlike any other. Week after week in the late summer of 1904, hundreds of soldiers were sent from Germany, along with huge supplies of the latest weapons and artillery. One of the soldiers of this new army, the young Lieutenant Ritter von Epp, wrote letters to his family while on his way to Namibia. They reveal the extent to which some in the army had come to see the war as a crusade for Lebensraum.
This world is being redistributed. With time, we will inevitably need more space, and only by the sword will we be able to get it. This is a matter for our generation, and for our existence.
Only when he was convinced that he had acquired overwhelming military might did General von Trotter order his army out of their bases and head for the Waterberg. On the morning of the 11th of August 1904, the German cannons and machine guns began to fire on the Herero. General von Trotter's battle plan was, as he said in his own words, to encircle and annihilate the Herero with a simultaneous blow. But these plans were not what they seemed. Von Trotter had left one side of the encirclement weaker, knowing that when they were defeated, the Herero would have to retreat through this gap in the German line. This would force them to escape eastwards. And to the east lay the desert that the Herero called the Omahake, that we know as the Kalahari. By the end of the battle, this was exactly what was happening. The Germans pursued the defeated Herero. For week after week in the summer of 1904, they were pushed deeper and deeper to the Omahake Desert. Once the Herero had been forced past the last waterholes, the Germans built a 200-mile-long line of guard posts to seal them in the desert. Now trapped, thousands began to die of thirst and starvation. But finally, to seal the fate of the Herero, von Trotter did something unprecedented in colonial history.
The history of European rule
in late 19th and early 20th century Africa is unbelievably brutal. But what sets the genocide apart of the Herero in German Southwest Africa is General von Trotte's explicitly articulated Vernichtungsbefehl, the annihilation order, in which he committed to paper his plan to destroy the Herero people.
On the 1st of October, 2 months after the Battle of Waterberg, von Trotte and a group of German soldiers reached the waterhole of Asombo Windimbe. The next morning, von Trotte read out a proclamation to his troops.
I, the great general of the German soldiers, send this letter to the Herero people. Within the German borders, every Herero, with or without a gun, will be shot. I will no longer accept women and children.
The important thing about Asombo Windimbe is the putting down into writing an official sanctioning of genocide. Why did this take place? I think that the situation had reached an extent where the German military believed that this was perfectly acceptable. They did not see that this was possibly controversial.
The Herero people must leave the land. If they do not do this, I will force them with the cannon. These are my words to the Herero people, the great general of the mighty Kaiser.
The thousands of starving Herero in the Omahake now seemingly had no hope. But in Berlin, the news of von Trotte's extermination order was a shock. The army and its supporters in the Reichstag had badly misjudged the changeable mood of the German people.
When news of the brutality with which Trotte and his troops are putting down the uprising reaches Germany, there are huge and radical protests, above all in the Reichstag, above all among the Centre Party. On this issue, they are radically opposed to the actual policies being conducted. And there are also newspaper articles. It's a national scandal, if you like.
Despite the scandal, the Kaiser refused to order von Trotte to rescind his extermination order. For 2 further months the Hereros were hunted down in the Omahake, until finally the government forced the Kaiser's hand. On the morning of the 9th of December, a telegram was sent ordering von Trotte to accept the surrender of the Herero.